So yesterday we were looking at the code for exception handlings, right? So in this video we going to focus on Chapter 12, exception handling, and file IO. Part 2 here we gonna look at what's the benefit of using try catch here. And we have seen that when using try catch, the program is not terminating, it's just going to continue after the catch is still running the program. Like for this case, if I try to divide number by 0, right, I provide two numbers and it's going to say an integer cannot be divided by 0. So it's pretty much just try to divide here, and there's a problem, so it's catch and returns, and the program still continue executing, not like the one that we use with the if else, right? So if I do if else, I try to run the method here to divide. So if I do 1 and 0, it just say divisors cannot be 0, because if it's equal to 0, then the program terminates, not continue running. So that's the difference here. So we see the advantage of using try catch, and we could apply to an example that we say beside the divide by 0. So try catch like to use when the errors happen at runtime. So there are three types of errors, right? At compile time, like syntax errors. So syntax errors should be easy to fix to your code, because otherwise your program will not run. Second error is the logic. Logic is when the program not giving you the expected output. Your logic is wrong, then your program pretty much cannot use. You have to go back and revise them. And the last error is runtime, which is very difficult to handle when you don't know when it's going to occur. Like in this case, if you say my program works fine here, I want the user to enter something from the keyboard input, I just say, hey, give me system.output print line, right? Prompt the user to enter. So enter something, right? So now user is going to provide input for you, but who knows what type of input? And that normally an errors at runtime create form or occurs when the user provide input. That's runtime errors, because you've been testing your program, it's never having errors. Like now I'm testing, I say 4, okay, no errors, it's just show out 4, right? So that my program works fine. But let me run again. Enter letter A. Wow, it's throwing errors. So user created errors at runtime. So how are we going to handle that? Like user going to see this and not expected output, because expected output is supposed to return A to the user, but it didn't do it. Why then? We see an error is input mismatch exception, which the user will never know. So how are we going to take care of this? We know that we can use try catch to help, right? So we said, okay, we're going to try to read. So we're going to say try, right? We want to use try catch because we know the benefit of try catch is the program still running, not terminating like if else. So that's why we pick try catch. And we're going to say this is an input mismatch exception. So while there's an input mismatch, then you can just say, so what we can do, we can just put a loop in here, right? Since we know the program will not terminate, right? While, let's say, I want it to keep looping, right? So to prompt the user to enter, right? So want to see an example here. Continue input, right? If there's an input coming in, this one say you do at least once, right? So something like, okay, let's do at least once. Do and while is we can set a boolean to make sure that the loop keep looping, that when users still want to continue input, right? Oh, sorry, this is going to be declaring it to true. So while the continue input is true, right? Continue input is true. Then we're going to pretty much just prompt the user to enter input and read in input and print out the input. So the read in and print it out is this statement. Okay, so if we use try catch, it should keep doing it. Even like there's an error on the input, it should not terminate like if else. Like I'm going to say if it's cache errors, just say check your input must be an integer, something like this, to notify the user that I want to handle by notify the user. So let's rerun the program here, and this is for exception handling with the input mismatch. So if I enter a check your input must be an integer. Alright, so it's prompt the user. But now something not right in our loop. It keep doing that because I always put it to true and I never prompt the user to enter the input again. So it's try to read next and check your input. While it's true, it's go back and prompt the user and it's try again, right? So it's prompt as Sima is already read in right away. So that's why I keep doing that, like carbon errors going on and on. So how do we fix that? So after we put the errors, we should make the user, right, to read another input again here, right? So let's create the variables here. Like I'm going to declare an int to start a user input here. So input equals to keyboard dot next int. So we're going to display input. Now, but there's an error at this point. It's going to prompt, and then we going to read the input again. But once the okay, let's run this first. Alright, so this one has a problem because there's no try catch here again. So it's just why it's return mismatch after the prompt. Let's look at an example. So we prompt the user to enter in, read an integer in, print the integers, continue, input equals to false. This one might mean you break out the loop. But when there's a problem, let's just do next line. So this one will give the problems when you do next int like that, because to have the old information. That's why we need to move it to next line. Okay, let's rerun this. So letter A. There you go. So check your input. Input must be an integers, right? So, and then it's just move to next line. Then it's not storing the old information. It's prompt the user again, right? So try to enter. It's waiting for us to enter an integers, right? So now if you keep enter integers, there's no catch errors. But if you happen to have the wrong one, it's just keep checking input is not valid, and program still continuing without terminating. So that's the point of using try catch here. If you don't use try catch, it's going to terminate when there's a problem, like we've seen it before. Okay, now let's take a look at the exception types. Now we know we have seen the arithmetic exceptions, and we have seen the input mismatch exceptions. So these are extended from runtime exception. So that means exception happen at runtime here. We also may see null pointer exception or index of bounds exceptions. So null pointer exception example, like you never instantiate a class object and you try to access to an object of the class methods. Index of outbounds we see in arrays when you try to refer to the length or index of array that are of bound, either -1 or greater than the size of array. Irregular argument exception, when the method has the argument that's not correct type. And then we have more exceptions. Now runtime exception is extended from exception class. So this is the hierarchy here. And we have IO exception that also extend from exception. IO exception is when you try to read input or write output to the file. And we're going to look at that when we deal with text file in this chapter. And we also have class not found exception. Sometimes when you run the program and you try to refer a class that's not valid, which is it's looking for .class. And that's why I say class not found exception. And then they have many more classes for exceptions. Now, exception extends from variable, and of course, variable extends from object. We also have an error extended from variable. Errors, there are some errors like linkage errors, virtual machine errors, and many other classes. Now, look at errors, right? System errors are thrown by JVM and represented in the error classes. The error class describes internal system errors. Such errors rarely occur. If one does, there's little you can do beyond notifying the user and trying to terminate the program gracefully. It's not like exception. Exception, you can just keep continuing handling it. Program still continuing, but system errors, nothing you can do, you just try to terminate it. Because this is actually caused from the system, not your program. Like could be operating systems. So exception describes all the errors caused by your program. But errors here describe all the errors caused by the system. That's why nothing that you can do. So, but if the errors caused by your program, then errors can be caused and handled by your program. And we're going to talk about that more in details. We have seen how we handle in input mismatch exception.